Good evening, this is Damien of the Virtual Pub Project, but you probably already knew that. So, today's episode, darts. More importantly, the history of darts, or at least interesting things from the history of darts. Like I do in all these videos, this is going to be a very broad look at the subject, and there is much more detail to this, but unfortunately I don't have 6 hours to do all this. So, quick bit of history of darts. So, where does darts originate from? The first sort of instance we have of this actually goes back to the medieval period. So, medieval period, they quite liked having a bit of a war. You know, all right through the medieval period, there's always a war going on somewhere, whether it's local lords having a big old fight with each other, or the king going off to claim back the Holy Lands from the evil Saracens. So, our first sort of thing we get for darts is the medieval period. Soldiers. There's a couple of trains of thought here. We have records of soldiers throwing small metal objects at a wine cask. Big old wine cask. John and Bill, they're going to do that, they're going to throw some little spearheads. Now, these could have been arrows, could have been crossbow bolts, are the more likely ones that they were crossbow bolts. But we also do have reference to throwing javelins. Now, these could have been absolutely huge things. They could also have been quite a bit smaller for your average infantryman to hold. You know, they're going into battle, you've got your shield wall up, and you're sat ready waiting for that onslaught of soldiers coming towards you. Oh, we've got time to knock a few of those at them and see if we can weaken them down a little bit before we get to hand-to-hand combat with us. Alternatively, if you're in a siege scenario where you're defending walls from an attacker coming at you, I'm not trained in a longbow, but I can sure throw a thing like that and go for it. So it's entirely plausible that infantrymen had these little war darts on them that they then just made a game out of, throwing them at a wine cask. Now, this got through to the officers, who went, "Brilliant! They're practising how to throw weapons and they're having fun with it. Absolutely, encourage the men to do this." So it actually became very, very popular amongst the soldiers. Now, there isn't a lot of knowledge on whether this applied to it, but I know in the late medieval period they actually banned archery as a game. So, again, soldiers out on their way, having a fight. The archers were going, "Oh, I'm bored, let's fire at a target. Oh, I bet you a shilling that I can make the shot on that target there, which is slightly smaller. I bet you a shilling I can go even smaller, and smaller, and smaller." And what would happen is, Bob would lose a shilling to Jim. Jim would go, "Double or nothing, double or nothing." Then it would go back to Bob, who'd go, "Oh, I lost that one, double or nothing, double or nothing." And soldiers were betting their entire wages for a month in these archery games. And then going, "Oh, I need that money back. Well, I have a sword and he's asleep." And away they would go, and they'd steal back their money, and there'd be fights and all this. So the king actually banned archery target games. I'd assume they did the same with darts, but it's entirely plausible that actually they didn't. The only real difference we get with darts is they stop them throwing them at wine casks, because they need the wine casks, and instead instruct them, go to the nearby forest, cut down a tree, and saw off a round section, put that up against the wall, throw your darts at that. Which was brilliant. It gave them an amazing scoring system, because the rings in a tree then became how close you were to the centre. Which is where apparently we get the modern round dartboard from. So, where do we go from here? Well, obviously medieval period ends, soldiers bring this concept back, we start developing into the modern pub. So, about 1844, we see various weaponised throwing games becoming popular in pubs. Now, during this time period, everyone has their own version of the dartboard. See image for details. So we've got all sorts of different regional areas deciding a different set of rules for the game. And it isn't until about 1920-ish that we start seeing the more modernisation of what's known as the London dartboard, which is what we have today as the modern dartboard. So that's where that goes. There's all sorts of versions of this still, though, and one of the more popular ones is called blow darts, where you have a big tube and you like that, and that's how you get your darts in the board. And this is actually listed in the 1920s Acceptable Games for a Public House book, which was a set of legislation that implied what was good and bad games to have in a public house, because at this time any game of chance was outlawed. It was completely outlawed. Now, this is where something a bit more amusing comes in, because in 1908 in Leeds there is a pub called the Alphin Inn, where the landlord Jim Garson was taken to court. He was taken to court by the local constabulary because he was allowing games of chance in his pub, and that was wrong and naughty, and he shouldn't have been doing it. Because he was allowing people to play darts. The local magistrates, the big wigs in charge, who had no idea what they were talking about, how things haven't changed, seemed to think that they know better and that darts was a game of chance and there was no skill in it whatsoever. So, what does Jim do? Well, he gets hold of a guy called William Ankin, also nicknamed Bigfoot, and gets him to come to the court with him. Now, he arranges for a dartboard to be set up in the court as part of the hearing and the trial, and the prosecution come in and, it's a game of chance, you just throw things and it's all chance, there's no skill involved. And he gets his friend, Mr. Anakin, to come up and throw 3 darts at the board. And he consecutively gets the 3 darts in the 20 section. He then goes, "Gentlemen of the prosecution, Your Honour, I hereby challenge any of you to come here and replicate that shot." So the prosecution walk up with their darts and they throw them at the dartboard. The judge comes down and has a go at it, sits back in his seat and goes, "Well, nobody could replicate that, so obviously there is skill in darts. It is a skilled game, it's not a game of chance and stupidity. Don't be dumb. Case dismissed. Sorry for wasting your time." And then, in the 1920s they have this publication that says that darts is a skill game and therefore allowed in pubs and doesn't break the rule of chance games in pubs. Now, where do we get the name the Oki? Remember the video we did yesterday, or the day before? The Oki, the little raised platform that you put your foot up to throw your darts. Now, there's 2 potential places this may have come from. One is from a 1920s newspaper article that referred to it as a hockey, so it could have been an abbreviation of hockey. Or, for the one I want to believe, because I'm a publican and, this is all about pubs and all that place, is the Hockney and Sons Brewery. Now, back in those days, the dartboard had to be 9 feet away from where you were throwing. Hockney and Sons Brewery delivered beers, bottles, in boxes, which said hockey on the side, that were exactly 3 feet. So if you line 3 of those up, you get your perfect 9-foot throwing line, you can throw from there, and there was no quibbling or debating. You put your foot up against something solid, so you can't say that someone was a little bit over or a little bit closer to the line. And that gets popularised through the pub system, and there we get the abbreviation Oki. Oh, you've got your Oki boxes, yeah, put those up there, happy days. So that's where that potentially may have come from, is where do we get the phrase the Oki? Oki and Sons Brewery, for throwing darts, put 3 boxes up there. Now we just use a little bit of wood, but yeah. Interesting facts of history and all that jazz. So, where was the dartboard, as we know it today, the London or clock dartboard, popularised? Well, it's believed to have come from a guy called Brian Garnett, who was a manufacturer of wire. He was a wire maker and would have made dartboards. And it's entirely plausible that he devised a dartboard that was much more longer wearing, slightly better, and laid out in the positioning system that we have today, and therefore popularised this is where the numbers should go. And supposedly he designed it so that if you were, say, aiming for a 111, because that was what you needed to win the game, and you were inaccurate, you'd land on the 20 and you'd bust, and it would be all awful for you. It was meant to punish people for not being skilled at the game, and all that. Sort of that, we then come into modern times. Darts sort of going for a bit of an up and a down and an up and a down and up and a down, and that's because of that fantastic show, Not the 9 O'Clock News. Now, there is a rather amusing sketch scene on Not the 9 O'Clock News, where dart players are seen as just drunken louts getting pissed up and then not really bothering about throwing their darts. Please see clip now.
Ready to go first. And it's a good start. Double vodka. Single pint. Another double vodka.
100 milligram.
100 milligram.
And this has had a bit of a negative effect on the game, Obviously, attendance and people interested in the game has dropped down quite a lot. It also comes to the loss of what we have in pubs. A lot of traditional pubs that do traditional pub games are fading out. One pub every week, this has been before lockdown, one pub every week closed its doors permanently because of a lack of support it was getting from the government and all that. That number, I can only imagine, has skyrocketed at the moment because of what's going on with COVID-19 and all of these lockdowns that we're going through. It is an incredibly difficult time to be a publican at the moment. But yeah, so they had this sketch where they were doing all this nasty drinking and all this, and a lot of people went, well, I don't want to be involved in just some stupid drunkard's game. Which is why, if you watch a lot of darts now on TV, a lot of people who are playing the game will very clearly be drinking bottled water because they're trying to get away from that stigma that was done by this one comedy sketch, which was so popular that it damaged the game significantly. But now, obviously, it is what it is. I said a lot of places you play these things are pubs. A lot of pubs are struggling and suffering at the moment, and that's sort of where we are in the world today. There are still local dart leagues. I highly recommend you get hold of your local team if you are interested in darts. Please go and get involved. Let's get a bit of a resurgence going. It's a beautiful traditional pub game that needs some more love and all that jazz. So that is a brief history of the interesting points I found from the history of darts. I hope you have enjoyed this. If you have enjoyed this, please feel free to give our page, the Virtual Pub Project page, a like and a share. And obviously go and check out that Coffee link because it allows us to be able to make more content like this and also help support our pub during lockdown. So other than that, I've been Damien. This has been the Virtual Pub Project. See you soon.